Good morning, everybody. Hope you're doing well. So like many of you, I think, I loved my job as the head of learning and development for the Leadership Institute at McDonald's. One big reason was that I got the great opportunity to spend time with wicked smart thought leaders, and being kind of a lifelong learner. Every day at work was an opportunity to grow and learn, along with the executives that we were responsible for developing. So, with that in mind, in 2006, I had the opportunity to meet David Gosset and to listen to him. I think the first time I heard him speak, he spoke for 3 hours. And I never thought I could listen to a presenter for 3 hours, and it felt like 20 minutes. And we could have listened to him for another 1 or 2 hours. He had one slide. It was a map of China. And we were trying to teach our executives not to rely on PowerPoint. So he was a great model for that. He had one prop. That's all he needed. And since then, I've had the pleasure of listening to David speak maybe 5 or 6 more times. And every time I hear him speak, I learn more. I get a deeper appreciation and understanding of China and Eurasia. And so we're very fortunate to have him. He is an international and global expert on affairs in China and Eurasia. He's the director of Academia Sinica Europa and a professor at China-Europe International Business School, CIBS. He's professor of philosophy there, and his academic research covers not only the China-Europe relationship, but also the concept of Eurasia and its articulation with the world system. He's also the founder of the Euro-China Forum. He's French-born. He lives in Shanghai and travels extensively. Every time we trade emails, he's in a different country. And I never know where to find him, but he always responds like that to emails, and I've always appreciated that. He's one of the brightest, but also most humble and witty people I know. And humble and French sometimes doesn't go together. No offense to French, but he's a wonderful person as well. The title of his talk today is Navigating Global Disorder, which I think we could all agree is an important topic these days. So please give a warm and enthusiastic Fred welcome to David Gosset.
Well, thank you very much, David. I am really moved to be here with all of you. I see many friends in the room. I just want to tell you that I am not a hero. We have heroes in the room. I am not one of them. And yes, I am a little bit busy, as you are. And I would like to reassure you that today I am not going to talk for 3 hours. This is, you know, as they say in, well, this is not lunchtime yet. Sorry, I'm a little bit jet lagged. But as they say in Italians, speeches have to be short and pasta long. So today it's going to be a short, let's say, talk, because I came here mainly to have a conversation with all the colleagues and the friends sitting in the room. But I really didn't want to miss your forum, Alan, David, Rocky, because it's so special to have, let's say, a collective reflection on leadership with people coming to talk about Shakespeare, with a visit to the Sagrada Familia conceived by the great Gaudi. And I like this approach that you have toward leadership. By the way, talking about literature, since we are in Barcelona, in Spain, I cannot not to think about Cervantes, Don Quixote. And we have Bill Taylor sitting over there, and you are a master of storytelling. But I think the master of all the masters in terms of storytelling has been and remains Cervantes. And today, what I'm going to do is only to tell a story on the world as I see it. And as you know, a story is here only for us to think about it, of course, but to debate it and to also to deconstruct it. So I hope you will challenge this story. Look, yes, I have chosen this topic, disorder, and at some point, when I develop my views, some of you are going to tell, but this guy is really pessimistic about the world in which we live. And of course, we are facing some major challenges, but I would not like you to think that I belong to the pessimistic people. Actually, you know, very often we ask ourselves, in which period of history we would have loved to live? This is a question we ask ourselves, or we discuss with friends. I have to tell you, I think I would have been very happy in the Athens of Pericles, classical Greece. I think I would have been very happy and certainly stimulated by the climate, the atmosphere in the Florence of the Renaissance. Certainly, as you said, David, I have some connections with China. I would have loved to witness the dynamics of Tang Dynasty China in the 8th century. But I have to tell you that still we are very privileged to live in the world as it is today. And I think because we have these unprecedented opportunities, and certainly opportunities to meet because of technology and so on. So this is not E.M. Forster, you remember Howard's End and the very famous epigraph, only connect. For me, it would be gratitude only. I am very grateful to be here, of course, invited by the Fred Forum, to be here with friends, but also to be here at this moment of the history of mankind. I wanted to tell you that so you do not misunderstand what I'm going to say. Another preliminary remark, and I understand that, so we have some military friends in the room, of people who have been working at West Point. Because of military analysts, many of us, we love to use the acronym VUCA, you know, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. And you know exactly what it means. I am more basic. I am thinking in terms of A, B, C, D. A for acceleration. I think this is a very important feature of our time. What is highly significant is not change, but the speed of change. B for big data, because I think, and I will come back to that, a very important element of our world is what is happening in the field of technology. And I have to tell you that today our problem is not to be lost in translation in Tokyo, but it is to be lost in an enormous flow of data and information. How for us to make sense of this information? A, B, C. C would be here in my mind for crisis, of course, and I have learned the origin of the Freight Forum today in the aftermath of the economic crisis of 2008. But what is very interesting today in the world in which we live, it seems that we add crisis to crisis. We are unable anymore to solve any crisis. By the way, the economic crisis of 2008, it is still going on. Think about Greece, think about Spain, think about the banking situation in Italy, and think about the Brexit, which happened on June 23rd, because I think one of the causes of the Brexit has been the fact that Europe, the EU system, has been unable to digest the shock of the 2008 financial crisis. It is a crisis which is not yet solved. Think about the crisis in Ukraine. Think about the tragedy of the Middle East while we speak. Remember 2011, one person died in Tunisia, and then a massive change in Egypt, a country collapsed, Libya, of course, in North Africa, which is in 13 pieces today, and we have on the table to deal with the problem of Syria. And nobody knows what is going to be the end game in Syria. And this is something which worries me. We add crisis to crisis. Is this an issue of leadership? Do we have the right leaders able to deal with this crisis? I don't know, but this is a trend that I observe. Social, economic, political, geopolitical crisis that we are adding. A, B, C, D, and indeed the D is here for disorder, and you will understand why in my narrative I think it makes great sense to speak about disorder. But here already I have a good news. Today, the very fact that you and I, we make the effort to understand disorder is a way to order the disorder, because to understand the causes of disorder is, I think, the beginning of ordering it. So I am here to, yes, to try to make sense of the disorder and to try to put us on another path, if I may say. Now I go into the core of my talk, but I would like to add something. A corollary of the A, B, C, D, and especially C and D, and especially D. And it makes the job of analysts like me more interesting, but also increasingly more difficult, is that it is becoming increasingly complex and difficult to predict anything. I think we have never been good at predictions. You know, in business schools and consultants, we like to go in rooms filled with executives, with presentation on the world in 2020, the world in 2030, the world in 2050. In fact, when we do that, we are not intellectually honest. Because you and I, we know that when we think about the future and the futures, it's always possibilities, probabilities, and preferabilities. And we know that everything is possible, but because of the level of complexity which is at work today, yes, it has always been difficult to predict, but it is even more difficult to predict today. By the way, for those who think we are good at predictions, well, ask yourself, who predicted the Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1979, which did change the Middle East? Who predicted the collapse of the USSR in 1991? You know that you have people who are paid to do this job, CIA and others. This is their job. Nobody saw such a change coming. Who predicted the effects and the consequences of the financial crisis of 2008, its impact on the European Union? Well, of course, retrospectively, some people are going to come and to tell us that they wrote an article in 2006 warning us about such a probability. But in fact, nobody really predicted this situation. Who predicted, we come back to the Middle East, the Arab Spring Revolution? I remind you, one young person died in Tunisia in 2011. It did change the Middle East and to a certain extent the world because of the different positions of the US, Russia, and China on the very issue of Syria. And more recently, who predicted the June 23rd outcome of the British referendum? I cannot name people here, but on June 22nd, I was indeed in Europe, and I had a great day with, let's say, prominent political figures in Europe. And I can tell you, well informed, insiders, as we say, insiders. Well, of course, they were convinced that at the end of the day, the Remain would win. You know, in this business of forecasting, personally, I like very much Mr. Tetlock, the author of Super Forecasting. I think he's a very sophisticated mind, and as you know, he's financed partly by the IRPA, which is a very important US intelligence agency. And he is very good, very sophisticated, very humble, very modest person. But I was looking, because I am curious, as the super forecasting of the super forecasters before June 23rd, and of course they were wrong. They were wrong. And my dear colleagues and friends, I would not today speculate with you on the possible outcome of the November 8th American election. Because if we want to be intellectually honest, as it is today, we simply don't know. We will know on November the 9th. So maybe some of you are disappointed with that, but I really seriously think that we simply don't know, and I might surprise you when I go on the presentation, because things might indicate, but I repeat that we don't know, that someone we would not necessarily like to see as the number one of the greatest country in the world could make it for some reasons, and I will come back to that. So in my narrative, I think there are four major sources, four major factors of change. And each of them would be enough for for us to discuss the entire week. But I think what is really important is for us to think about the way they are interconnected. And clearly the result, the combination of these four factors create a world which is unprecedented, a world which is a world of unprecedented disorder. The factor number one is about demographic change. Look, we don't talk enough about demography. It is a very important element of global affairs equation, demographic changes. And here I have two things to convey. First, you know it very well, today we live in a world of 7 billion people. But by the way, this is new. This is unprecedented. I was mentioning Athens of Pericles, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. We are in the 6th, 5th century before Christ. I ask you to remember that the population of the world at that time was 100 million people. 100 million people. Not even 1/3 of the US, 1 Spain plus 1 France. Our planet was empty. Imagine the world in the 10th century after Christ. Christian Europe, Song Dynasty, China. Well, the global population was only 300 million people. We had no economic growth, no demographic growth. We move forward, imagine the world in the middle of the 18th century. We are in 1750. By the way, it was a very interesting century, and I think I would have loved to be in Paris at that time. Well, it would have been easier for me because in the 18th century, Europe spoke French. So now I apologize, I come to you with a broken English, but, well, I cannot not to do so because you are the elites of the 21st century, and I would wonder how many of you could speak French. But in 18th century Europe, from London to Moscow, Europe, aristocracy spoke French. But we are before the Industrial Revolution. The population of the world was 800 million people. 1 EU plus 1 US. Empty, empty. And then acceleration of history, as you know very well, Industrial Revolution, the US being a pure product of political and economic modernity, if you consider that the US was born in 1776. And we saw the increase of global population. Remember that in 1850, the world population was 1.2 billion people. But still, the population of China today is bigger than the population of the world in 1850. And something extraordinary happened. In 100 years, the population of the world doubled from 1850 to 1945. We jumped from 1.2 to 2.5 billion people. And I insist on that because this is extraordinary achievement. I love life. So the more we are, the better from that perspective. And note that we have had in 1914 and 1939 the two most terrible wars in the history of mankind. And despite the loss during these wars, still we had the increase of global population. This is very interesting to notice. But what happened from 1945 to now, it was not double of population, much more than that, 2.5 to 7 billion. And my dear colleagues, and Rocky, if we are here to reimagine leadership, we need to anticipate what it would mean for us to live in a world of 9 billion people, because, well, some of us will see that in 2050. Imagine all the problems we have today on the table, water scarcity, energy resources, environmental issues, job creation. And in one generation, we are going to add on the same limited small planet the population of India plus the population of China, approximately. Do you really think the way we live today is sustainable? We know it is not. But what are we doing to rethink the way we look at the world in order to build this context you were talking about for the coming generations? Because I think a world of 9 billion people, if we go on to live as we do, is going to be nightmarish. And I especially worry, I have to tell you, for job creation. I will come to that in 1 minute. The second element we need to take into account when we look at demographic change, it is not discussed enough. It is the increase of life expectancy. We know very well that traditionally, human beings, our life expectancy has been between 35 and 41, let's say. We have colleagues from China. I'm so happy, Phyllis, to see you here. But you would remember very well that in China, in the beginning of the 50s, the life expectancy was 41. In the beginning of the 50s of the 20th century. Today, the life expectancy of the Chinese friends is, in average, 76. But you know also, I don't know if we have colleagues from Japan, that in Japan, Japanese females, well, the life expectancy is 86. Italian ladies also live very, very, very long. Can I make a bad joke? We are among friends. They live so long that some people say that Italian women never die. It's a joke, it's a joke, it's a joke. No, but it's a joke, but at the same time, why? You know, because Italy does not spend so much on healthcare, especially when you look at what the US is spending on healthcare and what in Italy. So what is the secret? Maybe olive oil. Drink a lot of olive oil while you are in Barcelona, because the Spanish olive oil is also absolutely fantastic. But this increase of life expectancy is highly significant. And some experts tell us that by 2050, in some segments of our world, life expectancy will be above 90. By the way, there is a very interesting phenomenon I am following, as you do, as closely as I can, the American campaign. And there is a candidate whose name is Istvan. Have you heard about him? Because we talk a lot about, because you have many candidates. And Istvan is a very, let's say, I would say, eccentric man. So he's a transhumanist. He's a transhumanist. And in his program, he put, it's a very important part of his program, he would like us to live forever. Well, to go beyond death. Clearly a very eccentric man, but what is very interesting, I think he understands that new technologies are going to have an impact on our societies. And now I ask you to imagine a world, 2050, 9 billion people, and some of our descendants, they will reach 70, they will be very healthy, still 20 years to live, but the question is to live to do what? And I ask this question in a very provocative way because I think these people, they might think about going on to work, but are we going to have enough jobs to provide? And one of the questions we will have to discuss, I am convinced because of the technological change we are going to discuss now, if you combine demographic change and technological change, we are going to have to rethink the traditional dichotomy work-leisure. And the idea that some of us, for some reasons, would be satisfied with a universal basic revenue is not completely silly, certainly for me. We need to imagine or reimagine what it would mean a society like this. The second fundamental factor of change is, of course, technological change. You know that very well, but please, I have two messages to send here. By the way, we could discuss nanotech, biotech, and so on. By the way, I don't know if we have digital people working in the digital era. Remember that Google has been established in 1998. Google is a teenager, 18 years old teenager. We are at the beginning of the digital adventure. And here, and I'm so happy because we have military people. I think why it is significant. For centuries, millennia, centuries and decades, we have been thinking the strategic game in 3 and then 4 dimensions. Remember, land, the sea, we are by the Mediterranean Sea here, and air. After 1945, we have added space, and you remember the rivalry USSR rivalry. 4 dimensions. And with the cyberspace, we play this game in a more complex, let's say, context. Not 3, not 4, but 5, the 5th dimension, which is the digital. And you talk to military people, their number one concern is cyber security. Cyber security. And this is new. And of course, it creates an increasingly complex context or environment. But maybe some of us intellectually, we have missed the Google moment, if I may say, in 1998. But please, let us not miss the quantum computing moment, and certainly not the artificial intelligence moment. I am one of those, in the media, some people begin to tell us that there is overhyped. AI is overhyped. I would disagree with that. By the way, quantum computing, the first country, we will come back to China in a minute, the first country to launch several days ago a quantum communication satellite is not the US, is not Japan, is not France, it's China. And when you look at the 13th, 5-year plan of China, well, one of the top priority is quantum computing. And of course, artificial intelligence. I have an anecdote here, please, on artificial intelligence. Let us discuss that because I think, in a sense, I felt that 2016 has been a watershed. You remember March of this year, so Google acquired DeepMind, a British company established by a man of Greek origin, fantastic brain. And this DeepMind, the company, created a machine, a learning machine, whose name is AlphaGo. You know that in Korea, in Japan, in China, the main strategic game is not chess, but it's Go, Weiqi. And I was discussing with the Google people about this machine, and at the beginning of the year, they were saying, look, we are advancing, but still the best human brains would defeat our machine. Well, in any case, they organized a competition in March. The AlphaGo machine against the number 1 or 2 Go player in the world, Lee Sedol, a Korean. The competition took place in Korea. And you know what happened because you have seen in the media. The machine did not defeat Mr. Lee. The machine crushed Mr. Lee 4-1, so much so that Mr. Lee does not want to approach the machine anymore. He's traumatized. We are talking about very sophisticated systems. And it's not even strong AI, but still what some experts call narrow artificial intelligence. So it is going very, 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 very fast. And for your information, I come back also to the point that China cares about that. During the first competition, AlphaGo, learning machine AI, Lee Sedol, 60 million Chinese were watching the competition. 60 million. Of course, it's a drop in the ocean, 1.3 billion, but still 60 million. It's approximately the population of France and minus Denmark. So gigantic, gigantic. And by the way, I think that for Google, they will try whatever they can to organize a competition with the number 1 Chinese player in China. It would be a way for Google to become, let's say, to be maybe re-invited in China through the Go game. So I think we need to look carefully at this technological change. Third point that I would like to make, demography matters, technology matters, and I emphasized this, the importance of quantum and artificial intelligence, but we are witnessing something absolutely extraordinary, also unprecedented. I would call it a disruption in terms of what I would call power diffusion. It has been very well, I think, analyzed by Mr. Joseph Nye, the American political scientist of Harvard, but let us think about it. To put it in one sentence, when you think about power, well, for centuries, millennia, centuries, states had the monopoly of power. Power was in the hands of states. Well, today, it is not working like that anymore. Therefore, complexity, therefore, disorder. Non-state actors matter very much. You know very well the role of the NGOs, of the foundations. You know very well the weight of private companies. Well, Google has more financial means than many countries in this world. By the way, even from a Chinese perspective, the Chinese government cannot control a private entrepreneur as it can control a state-owned enterprise. This is a very significant change. Think about the Fred Forum. Well, when you have so many great people around, I mean, sorry, Rocky, but your forum is a source of power. Your forum is a source of power. And maybe I hope that one day you will have as much power as the Davos Forum. Think about the weight of Mr. Klaus Schwab. He's not in the hands, well, of course he has strong connections with the Swiss government, but the forum is an independent entity, you know, power diffusion. And my dear colleagues, when you think about power diffusion, the ultimate power diffusion is about one, information, two, social media. I explain. Yes, I still here I have very classical approach. I think information is power. But today, potentially, if you are curious enough, because we surf the web, each of us as individuals, we have more information in our hands than the President of the United States of America 30 years ago. We can debate that if you want. But potentially, you want to know what's going on in Ukraine, read newspapers. China, the same thing. US, the same thing. The only counterexample could be North Korea. Still, we know many things thanks to the information available to all of us on the web. And there is something very, very significant. Bill, I know that you have been working for the BBC for a long time. British Broadcasting Corporation. But remember, because of Twitter, because of Facebook, because of WeChat, the equivalent of Twitter in China, this is not about the BBC anymore, it's the MeBC. That is, I don't know if some of you are going to tweet from here. If you tweet, say good things about the Fred Forum. But potentially, well, it can be seen by millions, potentially, because you do not have necessarily 10,000 followers. But if people retweet and so on, you have this power in your hands. And again, this is very new, power diffusion. By the way, a corollary of that indeed is volatility. Because, and by the way, we would not have had the Arab Spring without social networks. It spread this idea that you need to get rid of autocrats. It spread through social networks. But there is a downside here, if I may say. I am convinced there are many sources of populism. There are many sources of populism. Populism, which is a huge problem in the world in which we live. Populism. But the fact that, Bill, you are a professional journalist. You have great journalists, researching, spending months to write a story for the New York Times. But if a man, the first man we meet in the street, can tweet, you can spread some populistic ideas. You can spread even some rumors, and it's becoming the equal to a well-done research paper written by a first-class journalist of the New York Times. And I worry about that. I worry about that. When you look at, again, when you go back to the dynamics of June 23rd, the day of the British referendum, social media played a very important role. Well, and of course, finally, and probably the most significant, of course, each of one, demography matters. And by the way, remember that I want also you to understand, and for that, Rocky, for you to choose Europe for this forum is so interesting, because one of the major issues discussed by Europeans today is, of course, migrants, migration pressure. And think about that. When you think about the increase from 7 billion to 9 billion, half of this increase will take place in Africa. Africa is next door. Huh? Africa is next door. Today, the African population is 1 billion people. I am talking about Africa 54, 53 plus South Sudan, 1 billion. In 2050, it will be 2 billion people. It is why so many people, and I am one of those, believe that Africa is the continent of the future. But at the moment, because of the situation in some African countries, well, Europe is under migration pressure. And it is impacting hugely the political debates in this part of the world. And this is only the beginning of it. The beginning of it, if all of us, we are not working seriously to make sure that Africa triggers a genuine African renaissance, as was said by the successor of Mandela, Mr. Thabo Mbeki. I have seen that in the Fred Forum missions, you refer to a very beautiful South African concept. So, of course, demography matters, technology matters, power diffusion matters, but please, let us think also about what I call power shift. What's going on in the geopolitical arena. And here, this is also a very important change. We are entering a new world. Why? Well, from a geopolitical perspective, since 1945 to 1991, it was not disorder. We had an order. Maybe we did not like it, but we had a bipolar order. Remember the rivalry between the US and the USSR. Now I am discussing with military analysts, military people, and I am amazed because many of them, they regret this time, which was structured. You know, you could develop a clear strategy about deterrence, and we were discussing about Henry Kissinger. That's what he did, beautifully in a sense. Then, collapse of the USSR in 1991, and some people in the United States of America, remember Francis Fukuyama, the end of history, they had this strange idea, especially from a European perspective, to think that, well, now we are going to enter a new order. Globalization, organized, centered, and structured around the United States of America. What I would call the fantasy of unipolarity. The fantasy of unipolarity. Of course, it was a fantasy. And I think that this fantasy died in a sense of Iraq tragically in 2003. The world today is neither bipolar nor unipolar. The world today is genuinely multipolar. This is not the world of the G7, this is not the world of the G8, this is the world of the G20. And when you think G20, you have seen the summit which took place on September 4th and 5th in China. When you think G20, remember that all the continents are represented. Africa is in the G20 with South Africa. Of course, Nigeria is not so happy, but this is like that. Latin America is in the G20. Remember that Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico are parts of the G20. The Middle East is in the G20 because Saudi Arabia and Turkey are members of the G20. Then you add the 8 of the G8 plus the European Union as such, and then you take the newcomers from Asia, from Australia to South Korea through India, Indonesia, China, and Japan, and then you have the 20 members of the G20. But in my narrative, and I repeat, this is only a story. In my narrative, of course, the emerging forces, Brazil, Indonesia, or the re-emerging forces, Turkey, China, and others, matter. If you want, the BRICS, or the CRIBS, as I like to present it, with I capitalize China. Yes, they do matter, but I think we are living in a world in which we are having to deal with a triangulation among 3 and only 3 genuine global powers. First is, of course, the United States of America. And here I would like to tell you that I do not believe in the narrative of the decline of the United States of America. A relative decline, if you want, because others are emerging or re-emerging. But if you compare the US with itself, the US is a great country. So maybe not necessary to make it so great again, I would say. But anyway, look, we know all the problems the US is facing. But let us come back to the factor of changes. What is the only country in the world, developed country, whose demography is on the rise? The United States of America. Japan is dealing with a very severe depopulation problem. This is the problem number 1 of Mr. Putin, from 142 million people to nobody knows. Siberia being bigger than China, which is going to become empty. And, well, the EU, let us see the impact of migration on that. But for the moment, well, the population of Germany is not on the rise. So I think this is an asset to live in a country, the US, in which you are 320 million today. By 2050, you will be over 360 million. It is a strength. And talking about the technological revolution, I would love to tell you that the probability for the next Steve Jobs to be French is to be taken seriously. But actually, you know very well that the probability for the next Steve Jobs to be still American is higher. And, well, I have to tell you everything. We are among friends. But last year, the economy of California was bigger than the economy of France. The economy of California. Well, let's see what's going to happen for the next disruptive innovation, quantum and artificial intelligence. But I think the US has a capacity to innovate which makes you the strength of this country. So therefore, the US is a global power and will remain a global power for the foreseeable future, whatever happens on November the 8th. November the 8th might have an impact on the way the US is perceived outside the US. But the decoupling American politics and American economy for me is a reality. Therefore, I don't worry so much. Maybe I should. I don't know. You will tell me. The second power having genuine global reach, well, I have been telling that for one decade, is the European Union, but I have to be also very honest with you. Now I have to add many question marks. Many question marks. Because still the EU is an economic giant. Still we are 28, the UK is going to leave. But the EU is facing enormous challenges. And for the first time, I would not tell you that the integration process of this continent has become irreversible. That's the problem with the Brexit. Since 1951, if you want, the story and the beautiful story of the European continent has been a story of integration. To put it in a nutshell, we have been able to transfer sovereignty and to do that peacefully and in a very democratic way. Nobody has been forced to join the European Union. But now with the Brexit, it means that this integration process is not irreversible anymore. And in the air, be it in Spain, be it in France, people are thinking about the possibility for EU members to leave the European Union. And it has enormous consequences in terms of political power. And my fear here, and we will discuss that if you wish, but Europe could become like Venice in the 18th century. It will be still a very rich place, GDP per capita, a place that you want to visit for the museums, for the beauty of the landscape, for the good food, but politically irrelevant. It was Venice in the 18th century. Remember Casanova's memoirs. Clearly Venice was fun, but politically irrelevant. And here we have Europeans in the room. I would like to remind you something. Think about the Italian peninsula in the 15th century. The Italian cities, they were leading in all the fields you can think about. Banking, they invented banking. Art, of course. Science, economy. Well, leaders. They gave to the world and to Europe this renaissance. And remember what happened. Well, what happened is that Europeans discovered the new world. And the world, the center of gravity of the world, shifted from this Mediterranean Sea to the Atlantic. And the cities, the Italian cities, the cities of the Italian peninsula, were unable to unify. Italy disappeared from the map from the 16th century to the moment where, at the end of the 19th century, Italy unified. And Europeans today, they have to meditate this lesson, because I am one of those who believe if European countries today cannot stick together, at the moment in which the center of gravity is shifting from the Atlantic to the Pacific, we might take the risk to become marginalized. These are slow processes, but very consequential processes. So let's see how the EU is going to evolve, and I ask you to look at the French elections next year and the German elections also in 2017. And of course, we have China. China has become the third, let's say, genuine global power, and we can discuss that if you wish. But I have been talking too much already, but give me 3 minutes still to convey a couple of ideas on China, because I worry about something. Today, when I read Western media on China, I have the feeling that this is the beginning of the end for China. Oh, China is having so many problems, you know. China is only growing at 6.7% a year. Well, 6.7. Now, please, counter-argument to that. It seems to me that China wants to do that, because the problem of China is to shift from a quantitative growth to a qualitative growth. Problem number one of China today being the environmental pollution. Number two, when you say, no, China is having now a more qualitative growth, they are integrating the sustainability factor and so on, people say, in any case, we cannot trust the Chinese statistics. We cannot trust the Chinese statistics. They cook, they massage the figures. Well, so then you don't trust the World Bank statistics, you don't trust the IMF statistics. This is not my problem anymore. There is still growth in China, and important growth. And please, third point, China is already 2 times the Japanese economy. The Chinese economy is 11 trillion US economy. And when you grow, when you have an economy of 10 trillion US plus, and you grow at 6.7%, every year you add in China the economy of Indonesia, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, meaning that every 5 years you add in China, in absolute terms, the economy of the UK. So the rapid Chinese economic reemergence is a reality. And we don't know how 2050 is going to look like. But the probability for the Chinese economy in 2050 to be 2 times the American economy is a probability I take seriously. By the way, you might want to have a look at Michael Pillsbury's book on China, the 100-year marathon. Mr. Pillsbury was with the RAND Corporation and also with the Department of Defense for many years. And so, let's say, well-informed on China, data, information, and knowledge are 3 different things. But you read Pillsbury's book, and then at some point he says, so this is not David, it's Michael Pillsbury, he says, we estimate that by 2050 the Chinese economy will be 2 times the American economy. This is highly significant. Of course, the Chinese Renaissance is going to be also impactful because of the political dynamics. It implies the intellectual dynamics it implies, and also because China has decided to go toward the world. And therefore, I would argue, and we discuss that in a minute, that from a geopolitical perspective, the major factor of change is and will be, for the foreseeable future, China. And of course, here, let us be complete on that. For the coming 2 decades, the major question will be, is it possible to have a peaceful relations between the US and China? And here I simply don't know. We could discuss, but we don't know. But we do not have many examples in the history of the world in which the country number 1 accepts to lose ground graciously. So this is going to be a very complex dynamic to deal with. And yes, Rocky, we will need wise leaders, both in Washington, D.C. and in Beijing. And I hope the Freight Forum can play also a role in this major story of our time. I spoke too much. I conclude in 5 minutes. You understand, because of what I just told you about geopolitics, this is a moment of disorder because the Pax Americana has ended and we have not found yet the new terms of a new order. We are in a transition. And this is the first point of this non-conclusive conclusion, if you want. But one needs all of us to rethink global governance. And I have to tell you, if we want to go from pure multipolarity, but chaotic multipolarity, to organized multipolarity, the relations between the US and China are going to be key. If China and the US work together, I think we will be able to enter a new harmonious global order. And it's possible. COP21 is a beautiful example of that. You know, the COP21, well, the implementation of the Paris Agreement, that's another thing. But we signed, remember in Paris, at the end of last year, 100 and after the failures of the previous meetings, we had to find an agreement on climate change, 195 parties around the table. We saw big diverging interests because, of course, Saudi Arabia's interest and the Maldives' interest are completely different. Well, we managed to find an agreement, and I tell you what happened. I have the privilege to work, interact with Mr. Laurent Fabius, who has been the French foreign minister from 2012 to the beginning of this year, and he was the chairman of the COP21. And he told me very, very, very clearly, he said, the secret to the success of the COP21, you take President Obama, you take President Xi Jinping, you put them in a room, make sure that they agree, and then the 193 follow. This is a reality. So I am cautiously optimistic we can make it. Antagonism, opposition between the US and China is not a destiny, but peace has to be constructed. That's another problem. I would like really to end with 4 very modest remarks on our work. Because we have a common, I think we have a common language here. We believe in education. We are, in a sense, educators. Or we pay attention to education. And I think for us to have our world of disorder more understood, therefore to begin to order it, we need to talk more about the necessity to decenter. To decenter. Again, we live in a world in which we do not have one center anymore. It is genuinely polycentric. And let us go to China to understand how China sees the world. Let us meet in India to see how India sees the world. Great to be in Europe. Let us go back to the US. Let us go to the Middle East to understand what it means to see the world when you are a Muslim. Of course, we recenter, we go back to Paris, to New York, to Washington, D.C., but when we have made the effort to decenter, we never see the world as we were seeing it before. And this is very important for us to go closer to a new, fairer, more harmonious global order. Third remark, Alan said it. Rocky mentioned that. Yes, of course, we love to learn. Yes, learning is important. But in my narrative, I think unlearning is as important as learning. And at our age, it is so difficult to unlearn because we are so happy with ourselves. We are so happy with the way we look at the world, and we don't even see how biased we are anymore. So yes, let us learn from each other, but let us not forget to unlearn from each other. And the only way we can go at another level of mutual understanding is to go through this process of mutual unlearning. It seems important to me. The fourth remark is clearly, and I love this room so much because I can feel that it is not monocultural. This is cultures meet here by the shores of the Mediterranean Sea. Therefore, we are different. Phyllis, coming from China, myself, being born in Paris, with always this temptation to be arrogant, as David hinted at. We are different, and it's true that difference can be a source of misunderstanding, tensions, conflicts, but please, let us remember and work on the idea that difference is a fantastic leverage for synergy and complementarity. Do not try necessarily to reduce difference. Use it wisely, and not to forget that difference is the very condition for harmony. But here I have also not a so positive message. I said we need to be wise. Well, here, the bad news is that I think there are two things we are very bad at teaching, or that simply we cannot teach: courage and wisdom. If you know a place in which they teach courage and wisdom, tell me, I want to go. But wisdom, certainly, we grow it through experiences. And here again, the beauty of the Freight Forum is that you are thinking about transformation. The issue is to be transformed into what? That would be also an object of debate. But I think through these experiences, through these journeys, if we experience the experience of decentering, we grow in terms of wisdom. Last remark, and we discuss, if you wish. You remember I said, for me, the VUCA is too sophisticated because I cannot remember VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. I am thinking ABCD. Therefore, I come back to my ABCD. And I add the E, A, B, C, D, E. This is basic for me, I will remember. Acceleration, big data crisis disorder. And what is the E? A, B, C, D, E. Well, clearly, two things that I would like us to think about. Education. There is something we need to reinvent, Rocky. And I love the letter you sent to us, the work on the prefix reimagining, rethinking, recreating, the re of Renaissance. I think we need to reinvent the way we educate people. And this, we need to have a discussion on that. And we are educators, and maybe the Freight Forum, we could come out with a proposal, a letter to, we are going to elect very soon the new Secretary General of the United Nations. We could collectively at the Freight Forum convey our ideas to the world leaders on how we see education reinvented for peace, shared prosperity in a world in which technology is having such an impact. And the second concept I am thinking about when I put on the table the letter E is entrepreneurship. And of course, all of you, you are entrepreneurs. I know because, well, you are entrepreneurs. I see some very successful entrepreneurs in the room. But I am not talking necessarily about the entrepreneurs creating companies which are going to help us to solve the job issue. Corollary of the point number 1 on demographic change. No, no, no. I am talking about another kind of entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurship, what I call the entrepreneurs of the self. How we as individuals, we need always to recreate ourselves. And here I am not talking about the career. Let us go beyond this idea of a career, but a path, a journey. And I would like, when we educate the young generation, to tell them that they can be the entrepreneurs of themselves, to go beyond the creation of an objective entity and to reinvent yourself. And if, as the individual level, we are able to reinvent in a permanent way ourselves, and then you need, of course, you need to put the ego outside of the room, as you said, because it takes a lot of humility and modesty to reinvent yourself. Well, you add individual reinventions, and you would have a fantastic collective process of a global renaissance. Look, before we discuss, I repeat, it is just a story. You have been so nice and so polite. You have listened to the story, but I really hope that you forget it. And we move to your stories, or together we rewrite another story. But again, thank you so much to the Freight Forum. Thank you for your friendship, and even most important, for your trust. Because in fact, we don't know each other so well, but I sincerely and appreciate your trust, and it is highly stimulating for me. So if you agree, David, Rocky, we can have a conversation, because, sorry, I told too much. I have really told too much, but we have 20, 30 minutes to challenge each other without any taboo. Yes, sir. Maybe we have a mic.
Yeah, we have a mic.
Well, first of all, David, thank you very much. Appreciate the narrative. These are complex issues, so it really helps to hear the overview to try to put some ideas around it. This past Sunday in the New York Times, there was a piece about the conversation of globalization. It argued that too much of that conversation is directed by commercial interests and economic, and the free trade versus protectionism. And the article goes on to argue that the goals of that conversation should actually be more about democracy and democratic goals and how we connect with each other as people, not only as customers. I just wanted to, if you had a point of view or agreed, disagreed with that.
No, thank you so much and for your kind words. But when I was mentioning decentering, it's extraordinary to me. You know, I repeat, I think the major factor of change in the world in which we live is China. What do we know about China as a civilization? What do we know? I have been educated in France during my entire education up to the end of it at the university. I have never had the chance to have serious conversation as China as a civilization. The values, the philosophy, the art. And because, so lucky me, because when you are a curious animal, you do by yourself. And you go to study in the Far East. But absolutely true. I am amazed by the way, well, actually, the work we have to do to rethink our syllabus in our universities also, in our universities. Because globalization, so by the way, in my narrative, I don't like to use globalization so well because I think it's a very shallow concept. And globalization, if you define it as growing interconnectedness, growing interdependence, then, okay, what do you have? So I prefer to think in terms of increasing complexity at the global level. And then when you look at geopolitics, clearly multipolarity. And what we forget, and you are absolutely right, is that China is a non-Western civilization. Therefore, for them, but we would rather be aware of that and to try to understand what it means and what are the consequences of that. For them, multipolarity means economic multipolarity, different sources of growth, fine. We have Europe, we have the US, we have emerging, we have China, and so on. Political multipolarity, because clearly it's a power game. Beijing is not Washington, D.C., and will never be. But also intellectual multipolarity. We live in a world in which a work we have to do is to reconcile different understandings of what it means to be modern. And the Indian understanding of what it means to be modern is not the European understanding of what it means to be modern, and is not the Chinese understanding of what it means to be modern, and is not the Muslim understanding of what it means to be modern. And this is a work we don't do enough. It does not mean necessarily that civilizations are going to clash, Huntington, but clearly this is not the end of history. But not to converge does not mean necessarily that we are going to diverge. We need to find a way to reconcile and to build harmony between civilizations. An enlightened, increasingly globalized planet. But how can it be harmonious if we understand each other so little, not to exchange goods, but to exchange more ideas, concepts, and to do that in that kind of, setting, without any taboo. So it's fantastic that we have China with us today. This is, and I'm sure we have many continents. So I fully share your view. I call it in my narrative. This is a part of the necessity to decenter, if you want, decenter.
Jeremy?
Thank you, David. Really enjoyed your presentation this morning. Thank you very much. I have a couple of comments, actually. And speaking as a Brit, somebody who didn't vote for Brexit but now feels kind of saddled with it a little bit. So a question first. Henry Kissinger wrote, war of the sort that we saw twice in the 20th century in Europe is now unthinkable. Because since 1945, Europe has come together. But war of the sort that we saw twice in the 20th century in Asia is now much more likely. And he cited 16 flashpoints from the Persian Gulf through to the South China Sea. So my big fear, and it's bigger than global recession, it's bigger than environmental concerns, and it's that our descendants will this century have to endure a war in Asia. So your comment on that would be welcome. Also, you didn't mention Russia. And again, speaking as a European, I discovered recently that Britain has deployed 500 troops to the border with Kaliningrad to stop, potentially to stop Russia reinforcing Kaliningrad, their enclave, through NATO or through the Baltic states, all of which are NATO members, and a Russian invasion would trigger Article 5 and would potentially bring NATO into conflict with Russia. There's no debate about this in the UK. There's no concern. That really surprises me. We've been to war twice in the last century because of our treaty obligations to smaller states. Are you concerned about Russia? Or can you reassure me and tell me that I shouldn't be?
Thank you so much. Two answers. I don't know and I don't know. But I'm going to tell you my story. Yes, North Korea it's a serious issue. The impact of US-China rivalry and the consequences on Japan, China, Taiwan, China, so Vietnam, China, Philippines, China, and the South China Sea. Everything you said is absolutely correct. But the key point here will be, well, US-China. And I think you have such economic interdependence, but that would not be enough. But we have it, economic interdependence. China, US, but also Japan, China, you know, they trade 300 billion US a year. Remember that we live in a world, we live in the nuclear age, meaning what has been true deterrence between the US and USSR is also valid for the US vis-à-vis China. But there is something more because, you know, there is China as a civilization, the wisdom. They will not make mistakes that have been done, by the way, by the USSR. When China is talking about peaceful rise, this is both tactical, because China needs time, and strategic, because this is the goal. And you know, I have encouraged already Rocky to have the Freight Forum in China. That would be also interesting for us to discuss what are their understanding of leadership. And you would be very surprised. Because I don't think that, okay, in my narrative, China will have more and more power in her hands. This is a matter of time, more and more power. But the question is, what are the strategic intentions of China? Do they want to lead? Well, if they want to lead, we have a clash. But I don't think they want to lead, but they don't want to be led. They don't want to lead, but they don't want to be a follower. They want to be a co-architect, co-designer, co-creator of a new global world order. And what is important for the Chinese strategist is what is called centrality. That's what they try to regain, centrality. And therefore, American quest for leadership and Chinese appetite for centrality, I think the two are compatible. And I am one of those who really believe intellectually, you go beyond economy, you go beyond military, that the Chinese dream and the American dream are compatible. Uncompatible. So tensions we will have, but it will not necessarily escalate into a conflict. But you are right to pay attention to that. Now I come back to our dear Europe. As a European compatriot, I can be very honest with you, sir. The history of our continent is a history of war. We Europeans invented the concept of nation. This is a product of the French Revolution. The 19th century has been a century of nationalism in Europe. The conclusions of that has been 2 world wars that began in Europe. France and Germany, you know that very, very well. Wars that we exported. Europe has been a very creative continent. We created in the 20th century communism, fascism, Nazism. And I have a fear, I'm going to be paradoxical. I look at the Asian dynamics. They seem to be very, let's say, volatile, very tense, and so on. But let us be very careful with our Europe. Because for me, on the long term, what the history of Europe tells us is that if we do not, I mean, without the European integration, we might go back to the terrible mistakes of the past. It is why people don't understand Europe is not about the euro. Europe is not about industrial policy or energy policy. It is about peace. It is about peace. But we are in a such leadership deficit that we don't listen, we don't go back to these basics. We are unable to talk to the French people, the German people, the British people to tell them, look, we cannot, because by the way, of the risk to be marginalized in the world of giants, but when you are in the European context to tell the people, for us, it is first about peace. And without an integrated continent, we might go back to mistakes. The problem we have is our young Europeans, our young people today, they take peace for granted. But they forgot that France and Germany, the country of Rousseau, Diderot, D'Alembert, Montesquieu, Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, Goethe, well, we had 3 wars within 100 years. This is what is at stake. It's peace. And you know, it's also very good that we meet in Spain. This part of Europe is so European. You see the Catalan flag? They want to exit from Spain. This is so European, you know. So European. You are obsessed by independence. Yes, and the paradox of all that, I go back to the Brexit, is that the British people, they are thinking we take back sovereignty, but it is formal sovereignty. Because again, if we do not deepen the integration, all of us, Germans, French, Brits, Spaniards, Italians, and so on, we will be over-dependent on dynamics we do not control, American or Chinese dynamics. So your question is very good. Simply, I repeat, I don't know, but that's the reaction I have if I have to say something. And in fact, I am not necessarily always in the mood to speak. You know, it's very good to remain silent. That's what you are going to do when you go to the Sagrada Familia. Gaudi, this is the strength also of this forum. You go at the Sagrada Familia because you understand that verticality matters. Verticality matters. And by the way, globalization without verticality, or to talk about politics, geopolitics without verticality, it's also very dangerous. Very dangerous. we need to have also this dialogue with the invisible. It is inspiring.
Great, David, back in the corner here. Bill?
Hi, David Bill Wiggenhorn. First of all, I'd like to thank you because this is the fourth time I've heard you. And what I admire is each time you bring new learnings to the table. And many of the thought leaders we've worked with, after 4 times, I can give their presentation. So I thank you very much for that, because I always figure what you learn walking in the door, you will now share with us. So that is great. I was wondering if you could spend a few minutes on another billion people living in India, and in what you see their emerging role to be. And also, like even our own community, we now have Bollywood movies in our suburban theater. And our entrepreneurs and our medical professionals, et cetera, west of Chicago, very much are from the Indian subcontinent. And one of the questions we raised just locally is, will we continue to have this transfer of brains and knowledge, or will it stay in the home country? And how will they, again, create to be a player in this world with over 1 billion people to take care of?
Bill, thank you so much. And I want to tell you that you are an amazing person. And I love to listen to you when you are in action. I have been learning so many things with you in China and with people like Harvey Chen and others. You know, I mentioned to you, by the way, I fully agree. In a sense, some people, they say the real G2 is not China, US. When you think population, the G2 is China, India. Think of the board 2050. So highly relevant problem. But you know a little bit my narrative. I do not think BRICS. I think CRIB, and I capitalize China and Russia. Oh, I owe you an answer on Russia, sorry. And I will come back, or maybe at the private. The only thing I said about Russia was the depopulation problem. I'll come back to that maybe through emails or it's not that I don't want to talk about Russia. It's not that at all. But yes, Bill. But first of all, I was telling you the economy of China is 11 trillion US. The economy of India, you know that very well, is 2 trillion US. So China is here, India is there. But there is Prime Minister Modi. Fantastic energy, new ideas. I am waiting, but if China and India are able to work together, especially in infrastructure, then I would tell you, Bill, we really need to look at India seriously. But you know the reality of Indian infrastructure. It is inexistent, and it is a problem for India. Now, apparently, because for China, India, China, Japan, China, Russia, China, it's not going to be easy. It's tactical, it's not strategic. If China and India could enter a strategic cooperation, then I would change my view on India. And I have also something to add also, Bill, on that. Clearly, India does matter, but still a macro-regional power. And I have an illustration of that. My second point was technological change and to say, let's pay attention to the digital. In the digital, the world is not about a G20, it's a G2. Google, Baidu, WhatsApp, Twitter, Facebook, WeChat, Tencent, eBay, Alibaba, Apple Pay, PayPal, Apple Pay, Alipay. China is leading the world in e-payment. McDonald's colleagues, they know everything about that. Expedia, Ctrip, Uber, Didi Touting. By the way, Didi just bought Uber China. Uber was losing $1 billion US per year in China. And then when I say that in Europe, I ask the Europeans, Give me the name of 3 European companies in the digital whose reach, whose footprint is already global. They are struggling. Digital Europe does not exist per se. We have startups. If we have French colleagues in the room, you know that you would know very well that when I say that in Paris, people shoot at me because the French are so happy with the French tech. But the French tech, we are talking about startups. I'm talking about giants. And same thing in the Middle East, same thing in Africa, same thing in Latin America, and the paradox, same thing in India. Where is Digital India? Digital India as such does not exist. You have fantastic first-class Indian engineers working for Google in Googleplex, Mountain View, California. So if I had 3 minutes to spend with Prime Minister Modi, it would be, Mr. Prime Minister, where is Digital India? You have the brains, but where is Digital India? And by the way, talking about the digital, besides the G2, China, US, you would have South Korea, because you know the digital economy of South Korea, 10% of the GDP of South Korea, but it does not matter because of the size of South Korea. So I agree with you, Bill. We need to look, and we want India to succeed. We need India to succeed because this is very soon, in 2020, more Indians than Chinese people. But the outcome of that in the foreseeable future is India is a macro regional power in South Asia and in the Indian Ocean, with some impact in Southeast Asia and some impact in Africa, but not a genuine global power as the US is or China is today. That's the way I frame. And on Russia, I don't know if we have Russian colleagues here. The same thing for Russia. We need Russia to succeed, but I think Mr. Putin is bluffing in many ways. Russia is much weaker than people think, over-dependent on oil and gas. You have seen the price of oil. This is a nightmare. This is long-term problem of Mr. Putin. It's not Ukraine or Mr. Obama, or no. Long-term problem is depopulation. Mid-term problem is the price of oil. With this price of oil, he needs to rewrite the budget of the Russian Federation. But we should not use this Russian weakness to antagonize Russia. Here I am talking as a European, and I'm going to define myself better from that perspective. If you want, I am a European Gaullist, or inspired by Charles de Gaulle, meaning that for me, the end game for the European integration should be Europe from the Atlantic to the Urals. And since here, Rocky and the colleagues gave us this gift of literature, I would like to tell you, yes, Dostoevsky, Gogol, Turgenev, Solzhenitsyn, Pasternak, Tolstoy, they are as Europeans as Balzac, Cervantes, Dante, or Shakespeare. Yes. And this is the paradox. Russia is a Western country. And how come we have so big problems with Russia? And then, of course, Russia cannot not to have these very special relations with China. But we all know that this relation with China cannot be strategic. It's tactical. Putin cannot. If you are Mr. Putin, you would do the same thing. I think we really, if we need to rethink things, let us rethink the balance, this axis, United States of America, Europe, Russia. Very important for the future equilibrium of the world. Because at the end of the day, what we want is balance, equilibrium.
So we have time for one more question.
Yes.
Dan Garcia, Garcia Hansen Innovations. Thank you for the intellectually stimulating discourse. I am curious about your thoughts on what's become prevalent in the news lately in the United States with all of the hacking of the emails, particularly that Democratic National Convention, former leaders, and much of what has been disclosed from the emails, for example, from former Secretary of State Colin Powell, seems to be not slanted one way or another in terms of the information that was released as far as his beliefs about certain individuals vying for the presidency. So having said that, there's been much speculation about the origin of this hacking, and if for purpose of discussion, we are to say that the speculation is accurate, that it's coming from Russia, I have a couple of parts to my question. One, would you believe that the hacking would be originating from, say, lone wolf hackers or state-sponsored hacking? And then two, if in fact you believe it to come from state-sponsored hacking backed by Russia itself, what do you believe their motivations would be, and what are the implications of the release of such information?
Thank you very much, sir, and thank you to go back, in a sense, to the digital, because the question you ask is an effect of the growing importance of the digital dimension. This is a fascinating topic, but clearly, I don't know. I simply don't know, but I have a couple of ideas or let's say comments. It's a story. It's a story. I think what would be? I mean, believe me, Russia is busy enough with itself. Why? And same thing, because very often we say the Chinese government is trying to hack or to, but what? So media create this kind of stories, and then we have to discuss that. What we know, because these are facts, is that you have intelligence agencies, and they play with each other. It's by the way, it's their job. It's their job. What do you want? I mean, the NSA, they were hacking the French presidency just before the election in 2012. Of course, it created some problems. Then the two heads of the intelligence, they met and said, please don't do that. So now I would like to go beyond your question by two larger remarks, if I may say. Don't spend too much time on that. I don't think. And it could be well individuals also. You are right. You are right. But we live in a world in which you cannot keep any secret anymore. And this is new, by the way. This is new. If you think you can keep a secret, you are wrong. You can keep it for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. If someone wants, by the way, if someone wants to listen to us today, they can be very, very far away. I see so many mobile phones on the table. Believe me, you are always on record. Off record is for the naives. So you are always on record. The consequence of that is that when you are in position of power, well, you need to know that, because you don't want to weaken yourself preparing the next negotiation. Because if the other side wants to know, they know. And it has huge consequences on strategic businesses, nuclear, oil, and even finance, and even finance. So this is new. The diplomats have to learn how to operate in a world without secrets. And I was telling you, North Korea being, again, a counterexample, because you just pass pieces of papers in North Korea. They communicate, sorry, like the Italian mafia. The Italian mafia, you know, they never phone. they pass pieces of papers. Pieces of papers. So, by the way, this is a very difficult non-state actors, all the mafia we have around the world. That's very, 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 very worrisome. And the second remark I want to make, and this will be my final word, David, I worry a little bit because we have seen nothing yet, quantum is coming, AI is coming, and my dear colleague, which kind of privacy are we going to enjoy? I mean, it's so good to be all alone in Barcelona to work, not necessarily to do bad things, just to enjoy yourself. It's going to be impossible anymore, in a sense. You know that coming from Russia, a new technology, well, it's going to be very successful. You enter a shop, you will have, here is a photo, there is a photo taken by yourself, and then the algorithm going through your footprint in the internet, photos, Facebook, and so on, they will know who has entered the shop. What are your consumption patterns, and so on, and so on, and so on. So you know that the marketers, they would love this tool and the greedy people. But what does it mean for our individual freedom? And I think it's going to become increasingly an issue, because when you have this technology, you take a photo of me, and you know so many things about me. It's okay because well, I don't care, but still it raises the problem of privacy. We keep in touch if you wish, and we go on the conversation. Look, David, I stop here because in China, I have learned two things, sir, about globalization and our lack of understanding of other civilization. First, always to try to avoid extremes. The middle way, Chong, is so important. Therefore, to talk too little would not be appropriate, but to talk too much would be also a mistake. And the second thing I have learned, thanks to the Chinese wisdom, is the fact that contradictions are not necessarily scary or not necessarily negative. There is a positive side of contradiction and contradictions. China, to go back to Shakespeare, is not to be or not to be, but it's to be and not to be. To be and not to be. Therefore, I am going to end here, to keep silent, to stop the talk, to end the story, in order for us to continue the exchange in other forms. Thank you very much.